Welcome back to the Calabash Diaries. Today, we journey into the heart of the West African rainforest, into the land of the Edo people, the birthplace of the ancient Benin Kingdom. This story takes us far back, before the Obas, before the Benin Empire, to a forgotten era ruled by the Ogisos, the rulers of the sky. A time when family rivalries, migration, and destiny shaped the foundation of one of Africa's greatest civilizations. The Edo people migrated from the savannah into the West African rainforest around 900 CE. Drawn by fertile soil, rivers, and the protection of thick forests, they settled in what is today southern Nigeria. These early groups lived in small family clusters, hunters and farmers, slowly evolving into larger communities. But the roots of their kingdom lie in oral tradition, a story of a father and his sons. One of the oldest Edo oral traditions speaks of Ugbe, the father of two sons. He first founded Udo, west of modern Benin City. His elder son, Itebite, left Udo with his wife to establish a new settlement, Igodomigodo. The younger brother stayed behind to rule Udo. At first, Itebite paid tribute to his brother, but jealousy and ambition soon grew. When tribute stopped, tensions boiled over into war. Itebite's new kingdom, Igodomigodo, triumphed over Udo. From that day, Igodomigodo became the seat of power, and Itebite became its first Ogiso, its first ruler of the sky. Ugbe, the great patriarch, lived to see both his sons established, one in Udo, the other in Igodomigodo. But when he died, a dispute arose that would shape their future. According to Edo oral tradition, the people of Udo, led by the younger son, demanded that Ugbe be buried in their land, since Udo was his first and oldest settlement. But Itebite, the elder, argued that as the first son, it was his duty to bury his father, and that Igodomigodo, his own kingdom, was more fitting for such a great man. The quarrel deepened into hostility. Warriors were summoned, priests gave conflicting prophecies, and the funeral procession itself became a battleground of words, pride, and blood. In the end, Itebite's forces triumphed, seizing their father's body and giving him burial rites in Igodomigodo. This act shifted not only burial customs, but also power, for from that day, Igodomigodo became the recognized center of authority. Udo never forgave this humiliation, and the rivalry between the two brothers left a scar that lingered for generations. Oral insights, Edo oral traditions stress the sacredness of first sons burying fathers. Itebite used this custom to justify his claim. Priests from Udo invoked spiritual authority, saying Ugbe must rest where he founded his first home. The violent dispute reflects how ancestral burials were tied to political legitimacy. Whoever claimed Ugbe's body also claimed inheritance of leadership. Ugbe symbolizes migration and foundation. The brothers' rivalry mirrors themes of destiny and sacrifice found in many African oral traditions. Udo remained culturally significant, remembered as the lost brothers' land. With Itebite, now remembered as Ogiso Igodo, the age of the Ogisos began. For centuries, over 30 Ogisos ruled Igodomigodo. They built moats, earthworks, and expanded settlements. The Ogisos were known as rulers of the sky, a title that reflected divine kingship. They were seen as guardians who stood between heaven and earth. Their rule created stability. Markets grew, iron smelting advanced, and trade expanded into the Niger Delta. Fun facts: ancient Benin's earthworks are among the world's largest man-made structures, longer than the Great Wall of China. Coral regalia of rulers symbolized the sea, power, and divine blessing. Life under the Ogisos thrived. The Edo people cultivated yams, cassava, and plantains. Women dominated local markets, while men hunted and traded. Religion centered on ancestral spirits and gods of nature. Olokun of the sea, introduced to the Edo religious sphere during the Ogiso era, with one lore tracing it to a hunter named Olor from Ugbe. Ekaladeran Ezodua was one of his apprentices, who later established it in Ugoton. Ekaladeran was the one who introduced it to Eleefe. It was Oba Ohen in the 14th century, well after the Ogiso dynasty, who made Olokun worship prominent and mandatory by declaring it a state religion. Ogun of Iron and Osanobua, the supreme creator, were also worshipped. The Ogiso was more than a king. He was the living link between gods, ancestors, and people. His justice shaped not just law, but cosmic balance. As centuries passed, divisions grew. Some Ogisos ruled wisely, but others became harsh and suspicious. Nobles and priests competed for power. By the reign of Ogiso Igodo, the last ruler, the system was crumbling. Famine and unrest spread. People whispered that the king had lost touch with the gods. The nobles knew Igodo to be a very weak Ogiso and ignored him entirely. They did what they liked and got away with it. The towns and villages under the influence of these nobles and title holders strove towards independence. Likewise, the people, the Etsako, Otuo in the north, the Urhobo, Isoko, and Abo in the south, became free and stopped paying homage and tributes to Igodo. The nobles began flouting the law of the land and embezzling the sales tax, or Arigo's money, which was untouchable. Converting the kingdom's land and properties into private properties and selling them, this practice made it difficult for the poor citizens to get land for farming. This further widened the gap between the rich and the poor. The rich became richer, while the poor became poorer. The worst affected were the slaves, who lost access to land, and the rich people started selling them as a means of making money. People became concerned about accumulating riches and no longer took an interest in the affairs of the kingdom. There was social discontent in the kingdom. Igodo confronted the nobles. He stopped them from carrying Ada, a ceremonial sword and staff of authority that symbolizes the power, warrior spirit, and leadership of the king and his chiefs, along the streets and when going to the palace. He stopped their wives from having a special hairdo, okuku. He forbade them from having their own chiefs without permission. He abolished slavery, the sale of land, and the sale tax of Arigo's money, and forbade people from attaching themselves to nobles. The Edionisan, meaning the 5 elders of the Benin Kingdom, stopped going to the palace. They were joined by other chiefs, nobles, and others to avenge the withdrawal of slaves from them. The Edionisan were of course mindful of their hereditary position and started plotting ways of dealing with Igodo. But the slaves and poor people jubilated in the streets in support of Igodo's laws, which freed them from slavery and economic bondage. Igodo's greatest tragedy lay not with his kingdom, but with his own family. His only son, Ekaladahan, was loved by the people, but jealous courtiers, and perhaps even Igodo's queen, set him up. According to oral accounts, Ogiso Igodo inherited the throne from his elder brother, Ogiso Arigo, and after his brother's death, Igodo decided to inherit his brother's wives and the throne. The oldest of his brother's wives, Esago, was not happy about this and decided to cause problems for Igodo. From then on, Igodo couldn't have any more children. However, with his first wife, Ometo, he already had a son called Ekaladahan. According to the story, Igodo, after all efforts to have more children failed, and due to pressure, sent his brother's first wife, Esago, who had now become his senior wife, to an oracle in the company of his servants to find out the cause. The oracle claimed that Esago was responsible for the barrenness of the women, and unless Esago is killed, the women would not produce children. On their way back, Esago begged for her dear life and asked the servants to tell Ogiso that the oracle held Ekaladahan responsible, and Ekaladahan should be killed. Esago promised them fantastic gifts, and also threatened that if they failed to abide by her instructions, she would lie to the Ogiso that the servants had an affair with her along the road. The men, knowing what Esago could do, became afraid and agreed to change the message of the oracle. When they arrived, Esago told her husband and co-wives that Ekaladahan was responsible for their barrenness, and unless he was killed, no one could bear any child, and they would remain forever barren. After much pressure, Ogiso Igodo agreed to kill Ekaladahan, the only hope of the throne to have more children. This shows again how weak Ogiso Igodo was. However, Igodo was depressed, but as a weak king, there was nothing he could do. He ordered Ekaladahan to be executed. The executioners saw Igodo as a thoughtless father who made decisions without giving them much thought or weighing the consequences. They took pity on Ekaladahan and freed him at a village called Urhokhoko, along the Ekehuan-Ugoton road. They killed a chicken and used the chicken's blood to rub their swords to give the impression that they had really executed Ekaladahan. They let Ekaladahan go with the promise never to come back to Igodomigodo to save their lives from the hands of Ogiso Igodo. They knew that it was not Ekaladahan that the oracle recommended to be killed. Ekaladahan wandered far, eventually reaching the Yoruba city of Ife. There, he became a leader and is remembered by some traditions as Oduduwa, the legendary father of Yoruba kingship. Iwodo's failures marked the end of the Ogiso dynasty. Igodo, the last Ogiso, was eventually removed from power by the people of the city. After him they chose Evian, who was a well-known and powerful Ogifa, an earth priest and leader of the Ifa people, to become the head of state. But the fall of the Ogiso monarchy created big problems. With no strong central ruler, the kingdom was thrown into confusion. The nobles fought among themselves, which worsened and threatened the unity and stability of the whole kingdom. Later, Evian tried to pass on his power to his son, Ogiamwen, hoping to start a new royal dynasty. But the ruling council refused to accept this. Instead, they sent messengers to Ile-Ife, asking for a prince to come and restore order and a legitimate monarchy to Benin. This act set the stage for the rise of the Oba dynasty, with Oranmiyan, believed by many to be Ekaladahan's descendant, becoming the first Oba of Benin for a short period. Thus ended the age of the Ogisos, rulers of the sky, and began a new dynasty that would carry Benin into greatness. The story of the Ogisos is more than legend, it is the foundation of identity for the Edo people. From Ugbe and his sons to the mighty Ogisos to Igodo and the exiled Ekaladahan, we see how migration, rivalry, and destiny gave birth to a kingship that still shapes southern Nigeria today. Next time you hear of the Benin Empire, remember, it all began with the forgotten kings of the sky.